annyeong! Well, hello there, strangers. Welcome back. And if you are fans of this book series, then you know why I said that. This video is going to be another installment in my somewhat series. It's just gotten started, but I'm very excited about it. From book to film. And this particular one is covering a quite popular book series, of which I hadn't known when I picked up the first book, and then I found out how popular it was, and it was really good, so I had to get all the books. I have covered it in another video. This is the series from the book Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Again, I have another video where I cover all the books in the series, except the last one. The last one is Before We Forget Kindness, and I just got and read it. It was not out when I made the first video. But I do recommend all of them. Now, this book series did have a movie version made of it, not here in the US. This is originally a Japanese series by a Japanese author, so there was a Japanese movie. The movie came out in 2018, and it is called Cafe Funiculi Funicula. That is named after the cafe in the book. Now, the book series was published first in Japan in 2015. It was published in the US first in 2019. So we're a little bit late on everything. Before it was published in Japan, it was a stage play. That was its first incarnation, and it kind of reads like one. I think it would work really well as a stage play, and I'd love to see it sometime if possible. Who knows if we ever will. However, the movie, although quite different to the books, is also quite charming. So here I'm going to detail the differences and the similarities between the two. Here we go. The novel, Before the Coffee Gets Cold. The timeline of the novel. The first book jumps right in with the couple Fumiko and Goro, who are in the cafe and are arguing. She had expected that he wanted to propose to her, but in fact he just wanted to see her one time before he goes off to America for 3 years for his job. Then we find out that this conversation actually took place a week ago. Fumiko has learned that the cafe has a rumor that you can go back in time, and she's hoping to go back to this conversation and redo it. In this process, we learn what the cafe looks like. It is a basement cafe, really old-fashioned with dark beams, sepia walls. It's got one ceiling fan and 3 clocks on the wall. We meet principal characters, the owners of the cafe, Nagare Tokita, who is the owner, his wife Kei, and Kazu, his cousin. The novel is set up as follows. Each chapter is one story, and each story follows a visitor to the cafe who has come there with an express purpose to travel back in time. Now, Fumiko, of course, kicks this off. We learn that time travel is possible, but there are constraints, as there always are. The rules here are as follows. Number 1, you must sit in a certain seat. The seat is occupied by a ghost, and you must wait until that ghost rises to go to the bathroom. Yes, it is pointed out how weird that is. As a slight loophole, the ghost must drink anything that is put before her. The ghost is in the chair of a small table by the wall. She does speak occasionally, a yes please, when Kazu asks if she would like anything more to drink. She will say, move, when someone has taken her seat and she comes back to find them there. And one time she mumbles toilet when Kazu refills her cup one too many times. We'll get to that part. In the book, you can touch the ghost all you'd like, but if you try to forcibly remove her from the seat, she will lay a momentary curse upon you. While you are in the past, you must stay in that seat and not rise from it, otherwise you will immediately return to the present. Because you cannot leave your seat, when you go back to the past, you can only meet people who have visited the cafe before. To start the process, a cup of coffee will be poured. But during your time in the past, you must drink that coffee before it gets cold. If you wait too long and don't drink the coffee before it gets cold, then you will be stuck and you will become a ghost and take the place of the ghost who is currently in that seat. Also, the coffee for the time travel can only be poured by women of the Tokita clan once they reach the age of 7. If they become pregnant and another is available to pour the coffee in their stead, their powers become null. However, if they are pregnant with a girl and no one else is available to take their place, then once that girl reaches the age of 7, the powers then are passed on to her. And the last and most important rule, no matter what you do while you are in the past, the present will remain unaltered. The first story centers on Fumiko and Goro, and they redo their argument. Fumiko promises to wait for Goro until after he returns after 3 years. In the story, we also meet Fusagi and Kotake, both cafe regulars. He is in the cafe, sitting in a seat, looking through a magazine when we first start the story. It develops that he has early onset Alzheimer's. Kotake is a nurse and also his wife. He usually sits at the counter and makes notes from a travel magazine. It later transpires that he is writing down all the places he has visited with his wife. Throughout the novel, time does pass. Each chapter comes a bit later in time. We start in the spring with story 1, then into the summer in story 2, early August in story 3, and late August in story 4. The second story covers Kotake's traveling back to meet her husband when he remembered who she was. He has a letter, and she is curious as to the contents, but can't manage to figure out a way to get it from him and have him explain it to her. So she wants him to give the letter and get the story from him. So she goes back in time, he gives her the letter. She doesn't read it until she comes back, but it's basically just him saying, this is what's going on with me, and I'm sorry I'm going to be a burden, here's some instructions. It's all because he's simply not good at talking deeply. The third story begins with a young girl, a stranger to all in the cafe, sitting in that chair. She has traveled from the future purely to take a photo with the now pregnant Kay. We do not learn the girl's name before she returns to her own time. Then the main story of the chapter begins. This is Hirai, a cafe regular. Her sister Kumi often visits, and Hirai does not want to speak to her. She often hides. Then she learns that Kumi has died in a traffic accident. So she travels back to when Kumi visited the cafe to finally talk with her sister. She does not try to talk her sister out of getting in the accident because she knows this is impossible, unfortunately. When she returns to the present, Hirai goes home to run the family business. She had left it to her sister and been estranged from her family and her parents, but now she is going home to meet her responsibilities and settle things at last. In the last story, Fumiko, who is still waiting for Goro, again she's a regular, she hangs out in the cafe. She is intrigued to learn that you can also travel to the future and considers this because she wants to find out what happens between her and Goro once he comes back. However, she cools on the idea when it is pointed out that no one ever travels to the future because they don't know if the person they want to meet up with is going to be there. However, Kay, who has a weak heart, which is making her pregnant condition worse for her, has come to the basically inevitable conclusion that she will not see her daughter after she is born. She decides to travel into the future to meet her daughter, arranging a date with Nagare. When she is there, no one in the cafe is familiar to her, although she does see a slightly younger version of the young woman who had traveled back to the past to take a photo with her. Then Fumiko arrives, dashing in, saying, "Hey, this is your daughter." Her daughter is named Miki. Miki and Kay have their moment, and then Kay returns to the present to have her baby, and she does pass away. This is from the first book. It is not until the second book, called Tales from the Cafe, that we learn more about Kazu. The second book is placed in the future after the first book. We learn that the ghost's name is Kaname, and she is in fact Kazu's mother. When she was 7, Kazu, at her mother's request, poured the coffee for her mother to return to the past. Her mother did not return but became a ghost, and Kazu blames herself. We also learn that Kazu now has an unnamed boyfriend. They were friends in art school but didn't become an item until recently. We learn these bits of info here and there throughout stories 1 and 2, which center on customers. In story 3, we pick back up somewhat with Fumiko and Goro because the story centers on 2 of their co-workers, so we are able to see something of Fumiko's married life. Throughout story 4, again centering on another customer, we also touch on Kazu's new pregnancy. Nagare believes that Kazu should keep the baby, as Kaname would have wanted it that way, but Kazu is uncertain given her own feelings of inadequacy. Now, in the story, a customer goes back to the past and encounters Kaname when she is pregnant with Kazu. When he returns, he shares his full experience with Kazu. It has similarities to her situation and causes her to have an emotional breakthrough. She then tells her mother, the ghost, that she is finally ready to be happy in her life. Kaname smiles and is able to pass on. One more quick note that is important. It is not until the third book, Before Your Memory Fades, also placed in the future from the second book, that we meet Kazu's daughter. Her name is Sachi. In this book, Sachi is now 7. Kazu is no longer able to pour the coffee, and Sachi takes over for her. Now, all that is important, as you will see, because I am now going to talk about the movie. Cafe Funiculi Funicula is a charming movie, much like the books are charming. It has its shortcomings, but so do the books. It begins with a slow-motion sequence through everyday street goers, leading us to the cafe. We enter with a cat, it's so cute, and we see the 3 clocks on the wall. The cafe is more modern, more well-lit, and slightly bigger than described in the book. Now, at the outset of the movie, we meet Nagare, who is younger than I had pictured him in the book, Kazu, Fumiko, Hirai, Kotake, and a young man who is initially unnamed. Kei is not a character in this movie. As with the book, we jump right into an absolutely adorable argument between Fumiko and Goro. A week later, Fumiko asks to go back, and Kazu explains the rules. The rule about getting up from the seat has been replaced with a slightly less awkward but equally frustrating rule about not being able to leave the cafe. So either one works to keep things in the same place. A very bottle show either way. Also, in the movie, Fumiko touches the ghost and feels the effects of the curse immediately. So she waits patiently until the ghost gets up, then she's able to go back and talk to Goro. Once back in the present, Fumiko ends up going to America to meet Goro, and they set up a life there. Now, the time travel process in the book is described as the body turns to vapor. But in the movie, it's a little different, and it's very neat. It's more involved. The characters fall into a pool of water, which looks like a large version of the cafe, with many, many photos on the wall representing different moments in the character's life. The movie takes place throughout a year following the seasons. As with the book, Fumiko's story is in the spring. We then move on, starting a bit of Harai's story, with Kumi visiting the cafe and Harai avoiding her. We also focus more on Kazu, who it turns out is the emotional center of the movie. She is encouraged to get out of the cafe for a little bit, and she does so, heading for a photo exhibition. Some of the photos there are Shintani's, who is the young man who is a regular at the cafe. He knows Kazu and would like to know her better. We then focus on Kotake and Fusagi. Now, in the movie, their roles are switched. Fusagi is the nurse who is taking care of his wife, who has early onset Alzheimer's. She is the one who sits in the cafe in a booth, pouring through a magazine and making notes. I'm not quite sure why they switched the roles. I'm thinking perhaps because otherwise they have the women going back to meet the men and they just wanted to change it up. Otherwise, things are much the same. Fusagi goes back in time to talk with his wife. He lies to her and tells her everything will be all right. She gives him the letter. He reads it in the present, and there is not a dry eye in the house. Kazu tries to connect with her ghost mother, but is unsuccessful. She then bumps into Shintani in the street. They go for a lunch, play a game with friends. They wait for the sun to rise and take photos. Kazu insists that none of this is a date. She's simply not ready for it to be. Harai's story comes next, much the same as in the book. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, Kazu gives Harai a timer for her coffee, so she will know when it is getting close to cold. This is because when someone goes back to see someone who has died, they might be less inclined to come back. There is one cute thing. Harai has heard from other people what it is like to go back in the past. So before the process starts, she puts on a pair of swim goggles for her dip into the pool. It's very cute. Also, when she meets Kumi in the past, she does cave in and try to talk her sister out of the events that lead to the accident that takes her life. But of course she is unsuccessful, and things transpire as they will. Once back in the present, Harai goes back home and takes care of the family business. Kazu goes to Shintani's apartment. She tells him about when she was little and she poured the coffee for her mother, how her mother did not come back, became a ghost, and Kazu blames herself. He reassures her that she can't be cursed or anything like that she makes many other people happy, including himself, and that someday that happiness is going to come back around to her. They greet the new year together, and he manages to steal a kiss. Like, not steals it, good willingly, mutual thing. In the spring, they go to visit his family. Once back, they manage to sneak some new reading material to her mother without her noticing. Fumiko comes back from a visit to the US, and Nagadai reveals in conversation that it is possible to travel to the future, but no one does given the awkward logistics. Kazu finds out that she is pregnant. Shintani is pleased, but Kazu is not. Shintani suggests she go back in time to talk with her mother, but she points out that she can't because no one else can pour the coffee, and you cannot do it for yourself. Shintani comes up with a way to solve the problem. If Kazu ends up having a girl, then he can set up a date for the future for their daughter to come back to the past and pour the coffee for her mother. So the next morning when Kazu goes into work, her daughter, Miki, is there. Just like in the book, she is very effervescent. She's a real treat. She pours the coffee for her mother, and Kazu goes to meet Kaname. This is at the time Kaname was also time traveling. Kaname, I keep pronouncing it wrong, I'm sure, she had a cancer diagnosis and knew that she would not have long with her daughter, so she had traveled to meet her older daughter. However, Kazu was very emotional in the process and wound up getting hurt. Kaname lingered to make sure her daughter was all right. This is when the older Kazu shows up and convinces her mother to drink the coffee. However, the timer has gone off and it's too late. They have just enough time to have the moment that they need. Kaname makes sure that Kazu drinks her coffee and returns to her own time. When she gets back, Miki has returned to her own time, and Kaname is a ghost as before. We then catch up a bit with all the characters. Fumiko and Goro are in the US and setting up an apartment. Hirai is making a success at the hotel business, and Fusaki continues to care for Kotake. They find joy where and when they can. Kazu and Shitani decide to live happily ever after, whereupon her mother's ghost disappears. There's then a montage sequence over the credits of adorable baby Miki growing up in the cafe. At the last, she learns how to pour the coffee, and the entire family works together to smooth out the details of her trip to the past to see her mother. Now, as I touched on in the video about the books, the stories are great. They are so sweet, so real and fantastic, and they have great things to say about life, and that's probably why they're so popular. So they are very highly recommended. The way the stories are told, they're the narrative is, I don't know how to describe it. The writer is clearly better at stage writing than book writing, and he tends to go over parts like how the character's feeling when it's really quite obvious, and he'll do it again and again and you're going, okay, I get it. But other than that, yes, very good, and I do recommend these books, as I did before, and will continue to do so. The movie I also recommend. It is well made, it is well told. It has parts that are so cute and so funny. I was just cracking up with Fumiko and Goro there. Seriously, their argument at the beginning is hilarious. And then Hirai's hiding from her sister is actually quite funny too. So there are great moments like that, but then there are also moments like Hirai's trying to convince her sister not to have the accident that'll just rip your heart out. About the only thing is, it's just about 2 hours, and that's just a little bit too long, I would say. One thing I've noticed about Japanese movies is they tend to go very much into the emotional journey of the main character, which is great. That's not wrong, that's not bad, not anything like that. It's just that dwelling too long on any one element of the story is just too long. Like, if you can tell it a little bit shorter, not too short, not too long, just the right length of time, that's really more desirable, I think. But still, well-made movie. I had a few actors I recognized. That was pretty cool. And yes, well-made movie, well-made book, great story all the way around. Highly recommend both of them. Cafe Funiculi Funicula is not available in the US. It hasn't been released here. You can get the Japanese version on DVD, and there is a place to watch it online. I will link both down in the description. Anyway, that about covers it. So, I will come up with something new for next week. I can't wait to find out what it is, and I hope you can't either. Until then, these are interesting times we live in, and they get interestinger and interestinger. So I really, really hope that you are taking care of yourselves and each other. I hope that your personal story is only interesting in the very best of ways. And this year, with this book and this movie, which I do not in fact own, they are part of my story. What's yours? I'll see you next week. Bye.